My name is Cody Lawson, and I live alone in a rented duplex on the corner of 15th and Peoria in Tulsa. It's the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever happens, which is exactly why I chose it. I'm a night security guard at a medical supply warehouse on the east side, so I sleep during the day and work the graveyard shift, and my schedule has always been as steady as a heartbeat. Last Tuesday, I woke up around 3 p.m. like I always do, stumbled to the kitchen to make coffee, and that's when I noticed it. There were fingerprints on the window beside my kitchen table, pressed into the glass from the inside. Not smudges, not vague shapes, but clear, unmistakable prints left by someone who had been standing in my kitchen. I stood there with my coffee pot in my hand for a full minute, trying to make my brain understand what my eyes were seeing. The prints were small, delicate, belonging to what looked like a woman's hand, and they started at waist height and trailed upward like someone had been reaching up, fingers spread wide against the glass. The thing that made my stomach drop, the thing that made me set down the coffee pot and back away from the window, was that I live alone. I have lived alone for 2 years since my divorce, and every door in this duplex has 3 deadbolts on it because I am paranoid about being alone at night. I hadn't opened any windows. I hadn't let anyone in. And yet there the prints were, right there on the inside of my glass. I called my ex-wife Vanessa before I did anything else, because she still has a key and sometimes she comes by to check on the mail, but she picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding confused. "Cody, I'm in Dallas for a conference. I haven't been to Tulsa in 3 weeks." I asked her if anyone else had a key, and she laughed, a short, nervous laugh. "Honey, you changed the locks after we split. I had to give my spare to your neighbor because you took both copies." My neighbor, Mrs. Huang, is 73 years old and couldn't climb a flight of stairs without stopping to catch her breath. I went over and knocked on her door, and she looked at me through the security chain with the kind of careful suspicion that old women develop when they live alone. She told me she hadn't been inside my apartment since she helped me carry in a box of kitchen supplies when I first moved in, and she didn't have a key anymore. I thanked her and walked back to my duplex in the fading afternoon light, and I stood outside my door for 5 minutes just looking at it, at the 3 deadbolts I always lock, at the peephole that shows me the hallway when I look through it. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I went inside and locked the door behind me, every deadbolt, and then I stood in my kitchen looking at those fingerprints that shouldn't exist. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I took photographs of the fingerprints from every angle, making sure the light caught the oils in the prints so they would show up clearly on my phone screen. I measured the height of the prints from the floor, and I sketched a rough diagram of my kitchen, marking where the prints started and ended, and how they seemed to move upward along the glass. I told myself that there had to be an explanation, that maybe I was still half asleep and imagining things, that maybe the prints had been there for weeks and I simply hadn't noticed them. But I knew that was a lie. I clean my windows every other week, and I had cleaned them last Thursday, so the prints were new, deposited sometime between Friday morning and Tuesday afternoon. I went through my entire duplex with a flashlight, checking every window, every door, every possible point of entry. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was broken. Every lock was intact. I searched my closets, my bathroom, the small crawl space in the hallway where I keep my winter clothes. Nothing. I was alone, and I had been alone. And yet someone had been inside my kitchen, leaving fingerprints on my window like they had been pressed against the glass, watching me. That night, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, telling my supervisor that I had a stomach bug which wasn't entirely a lie because my stomach had been churning since I woke up. I sat in my living room with every light on and my phone in my hand, ready to call 911, and I waited for something to happen. Nothing did. The house was silent except for the occasional car passing on the street outside, and I watched the window in my kitchen, the one with the fingerprints, until my eyes burned from staring. Around midnight, I finally got up to use the bathroom, and when I came back, I stopped dead in the middle of my living room. There were new prints. On the window in my living room, the one directly across from my couch, there were new prints pressed into the glass from the inside, and this time they were lower, at chest height, and they were moving from left to right like someone had been walking along the window, trailing their fingers across the glass. I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't seen anyone. The prints had simply appeared while I sat in the same room, and the implication of that, the sheer impossibility of it, made something crack inside my chest. I called 911 and told them I needed someone to come to my house, that there was an intruder. But when the police arrived and I showed them the photographs on my phone, they looked at me with expressions that shifted between concern and pity. "Sir, these prints are on the inside of the glass," the officer said, his voice gentle in the way that people use when they're talking to someone who might be having a breakdown. "If someone was in your house, they would have left prints on this side of the glass, not the other side." I knew that. I had known it the moment I saw the first print on Tuesday afternoon, and saying it out loud to a stranger made it real in a way that I had been trying to avoid. The officers left after taking my statement, and I sat in my living room in the dark because I couldn't stand to look at the windows anymore. I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair with a kitchen knife across my lap, staring at the living room window and waiting for something to appear, and sometime around 3 a.m., my eyes started playing tricks on me. I saw shapes in the darkness outside, shadows that moved when nothing moved, and I told myself it was just the wind moving the bushes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from the other side of the glass. In the morning, I called Vanessa again, and this time I could hear the worry in her voice when she picked up. "Cody, you need to see someone. You're not sleeping, you're seeing things, this isn't healthy." I told her I wasn't crazy, that the prints were real, that I had photographed them, but she reminded me that photographs could be staged. She wasn't accusing me of lying, not exactly, but I could hear what she wasn't saying, that my mind might be turning against me. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, and that's when I noticed the scratches on the inside of my window frame, thin pale lines that ran vertically along the wood where it met the glass. They looked like nail marks, like someone had been clawing at the frame from the inside, trying to tear it apart, or maybe trying to climb through it. And when I looked closer, I saw that there were hairs caught in the wood, fine pale strands that I didn't recognize. I gathered the hairs with a pair of tweezers and put them in a plastic bag, and I took the bag to a forensic lab 2 cities over where an old friend from high school worked as a technician. I told him I needed a DNA analysis, and he laughed until he saw my face. "Cody, this isn't exactly how it works. We need a case number, a court order, something official." I told him I would figure out how to get him the paperwork, but right now I just needed to know what I was dealing with. He took the hairs and said he would do what he could without proper authorization, and 3 days later, he called me with a voice that made my blood freeze. "The hairs don't match you, Cody, and they don't match any profile in any database I've checked. They are human, definitely human, but they belong to someone who doesn't exist in any criminal database any medical database, any genealogical database that I have access to. I asked him what that meant, and he was quiet for a long time before he answered. It means either the person is completely off the grid, never had their DNA taken for any reason, or they're not in any database because they shouldn't be here. I can't explain it any better than that. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering my phone. I sat in my duplex with the curtains drawn and the lights on, and I watched the windows like a man watching the ocean for a wave that would swallow him whole. The prints kept appearing. Every night, there were new ones on different windows, always on the inside of the glass, always delicate and feminine and absolutely impossible. They started appearing in patterns, spreading across the glass like someone was pressing their whole body against it. And sometimes, when I looked closely, I thought I could see the faint outline of a face, a shape that was almost there but never quite visible, like a reflection in water that shifts when you try to focus on it. I started leaving notes on the kitchen table, simple questions written on scratch paper. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? And the next morning, the notes would be moved, arranged in different patterns on the table, sometimes spelled out in letters that almost made words in a language I didn't recognize. I called the police again, and this time they asked me if I had considered checking into a psychiatric facility, and I hung up on them before they could finish asking me if I was a danger to myself. The answer was yes, I was a danger to myself, because I was starting to lose the ability to tell the difference between what was real and what was in my head. I would see movement in my peripheral vision, a flicker of something that might have been a figure standing in my hallway, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I would hear whispering from the bathroom, soft voices that said words I couldn't quite make out, and I would stand outside the door with my heart pounding in my chest, trying to decide if I was brave enough to open it. One night I finally did. I pushed open the bathroom door and turned on the light, and there on the mirror, drawn in the fog that had appeared on the glass even though I hadn't run the water, were words written in a hand that was not my own. I'm already inside. I stood there staring at those words until they faded, and when they were gone, the mirror showed only my reflection, a man with hollow eyes and trembling hands who looked like he was one step away from falling apart completely. I went to my bedroom and locked the door, pushing a chair under the handle, and I sat on the bed with my back against the wall, watching the bedroom window. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke up to the sound of my bedroom window sliding open, and I watched in frozen horror as a hand, pale and slender and absolutely real, pushed the window up from the inside. There was no one on the other side of that window. There couldn't be, because my bedroom is on the second floor, and the outside of the window is 20 feet above the ground. And yet the hand was there, impossibly there, fingers curling around the edge of the frame, and I could hear breathing, soft and slow, and coming from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. The hand pushed the window open all the way, and I screamed until my throat tore, and I threw myself against the door and tore the chair out from under the handle and burst into the hallway. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, and I drove to Vanessa's apartment in Tulsa, pounding on her door until she opened it with sleep in her eyes and fear on her face. I told her everything, every night, every print, every impossible thing that had happened in that duplex, and she held me while I shook. And when I finished, she said the words I had been dreading. "Cody, you need to go back." She said it wasn't healthy to run away, that whatever was happening to me, running from it would only make it worse, and she was right in a way that I didn't want to admit. I drove back to the duplex as the sun came up, and when I walked through the front door, I felt something change in the air, like the temperature dropping or the pressure shifting, and I knew that something was waiting for me. I walked through the duplex slowly, room by room, and when I reached the bathroom, I stopped. The fog was back on the mirror, and this time there was no message, just a single handprint pressed into the glass from the inside, and below it, in handwriting that I somehow knew was mine, even though I had never seen it before, were the words, "Let me out." I understood then, with a clarity that felt like ice water running down my spine, what was happening. It wasn't someone getting in. It was something getting out. Something that I had locked away. Something that I had sealed inside that duplex with 3 deadbolts and closed curtains, and the desperate belief that if I just stayed alone long enough, I could keep it contained. I could feel it now, pressing against the inside of my skin like a second skeleton, and I realized that I had been the one leaving those prints all along, pressing my hands against the glass from the inside, trying to find a way out of the cage I had built around myself. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, and I sat at the table looking at the fingerprints that covered the window, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt tired. I felt like a man who had been running from himself for so long that he had forgotten how to stop. The prints were mine, my own desperate hands trying to reach through the glass to touch something real. And the thing in the mirror, the thing whispering from the bathroom, the thing that was already inside, was just the part of me that I had buried so deep that I couldn't find it anymore. I called Vanessa and told her I was going to be okay, and I meant it. Not because I understood what was happening, but because I finally understood that I didn't need to understand it. I just needed to open the window and let it breathe, let it exist alongside the rest of me, instead of trapped behind walls that only I could see. I'm still here in Tulsa, still in the duplex on the corner of 15th and Peoria, and sometimes I still see the prints on my windows in the morning light. But they don't scare me anymore, because I know what they are now. They're not the marks of an intruder. They're the marks of the parts of myself that I've spent years trying to hide from the world, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop hiding.